2017 was filled with cinematic wins from horror hits like Get Out and It, to the continued superhero domination of Logan, Wonder Woman, and Thor Ragnarok, to indie favorites like Baby Driver and The Big Sick. But not every movie that made way to the silver screen this year has seen such success. Here are some of the biggest stinkers Hollywood produced in 2017. The Book of Henry. After the positive critical reception of Safety Not Guaranteed and the financial success of Jurassic World, director Colin Trevorrow made a serious misstep with The Book of Henry. Sure, his third feature has a fantastic poster, but the film itself was widely dissed and dismissed. The pick stars Jaden Lieberher as the title character, an insanely intelligent 11-year-old who spends his days inventing Rube Goldberg machines, investing in the stock market, and taking care of his adorable brother. Henry is so smart as to be obnoxious, constantly correcting every adult around him, from doctors to school principals.
Hank?
It's actually Henry. I think you'd be able to retain at least one simple name somewhere beyond that haircut.
This prompted critics to pan the would-be hero as smug and unlikable, even as he tries to rescue his neighbor from being abused by a police commissioner stepdad by way of an elaborate assassination plot. Once his own life reaches a point of peril, it's hard to care about him anymore. Wish Upon. When Wish Upon hit theaters in July, it faced some steep box office competition from War of the Planet of the Apes, but that was the least of this film's problems. Instead, it was the movie's ridiculous plotline that sunk any interest in the film. It followed a high school outcast named Claire, who came into possession of a mysterious box that's been possessed by a demon who will grant her wishes but takes her life in return for her heart's desires. While the obvious way to beat this box is to simply stop wishing, Claire just can't get enough and keeps wishing for things that are hardly worth the cost. Critics hated the derivative plot and its superficial centerpiece, and the film barely recouped its modest budget. The House. You can hire all the comedians you want, but if you don't have a solid script, then your movie won't get any laughs. That was the problem with The House, the latest from Andrew J. Cohen and Brendan O'Brien of Neighbours and Mike and Dave Need Wedding Dates fame. Although The House boasts the talents of Will Ferrell and Amy Poehler, instead of giving them a strong screenplay to work with,
which we were kind of counting on,
it leans almost exclusively on their improv skills. The so-called comedy revolves around a pair of parents who open a casino in their friend's house to raise tuition money for their daughter, but things get wildly out of control. Soon the two become subordinate mobsters, using drugs and chopping off fingers. While it seems like this wacky premise could lead to some good gags, most of the jokes fail to land with critics or those few audience members who bothered to watch. A Family Man. Gerard Butler has not had a good year, thanks in part to this movie. The plot for A Family Man follows his ruthless businessman character who ignores his poor children as he tries to win the favor of his outgoing employer and outmaneuver his office rival to become the new boss, all while drinking a lot of Red Bull. Of course, things get complicated when his kid is diagnosed with leukemia, forcing our hero to choose between his son and his job. All in all, A Family Man is a predictable story that tries to jerk a few tears as Gerard Butler becomes a good dad, but critics found it hard to relate or root for his character. The Emoji Movie. You might think a movie featuring Patrick Stewart as a walking, talking piece of poop would at least be worth watching as a gag, but The Emoji Movie is such a soulless slug it deprives you of even that simple pleasure. It's a movie that's supposedly about being true to yourself, but really, it's just a big commercial for Spotify and Candy Crush. A lot of people scoffed at the idea of this movie when it was first announced, and rightfully so. The film was obliterated by critics, even though it still turned a profit at the box office. The Last Face. There's no denying Sean Penn is a talented filmmaker, but even the very best directors come up with a bomb now and then. Unfortunately, The Last Face is so bad that when it played at Cannes, the audience started heckling the movie pretty much as soon as it started rolling. The Last Face takes place in countries like Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Sudan. But for a film set in Africa, it's kind of weird that all the black people are relegated to playing background roles or mutilated corpses. Instead, the movie centers on beautiful white people falling in love, which did not play well to its audience at the festival or earn wide release as a result. The Nut Job 2, Nutty by Nature. The Nut Job wasn't exactly what you'd call a masterpiece, but it made enough money to prompt a sequel. Nutty by Nature follows its woodland stars after they're forced to return to the wild, at which point our furry friends, led by Surly, move into the local city park. Unfortunately, the mayor plans on chopping down the trees and turning the area into a theme park, and he hires a group of exterminators to deal with the rodents, forcing the critters to fight back. Critics panned the pig for being boring and unimaginative, and it earned less than half the revenue of its predecessor due to audience disinterest. The Dark Tower. Hollywood has tried to adapt Stephen King's The Dark Tower series for years, and now, after years of waiting, fans of the novel can finally see Roland shoot with his mind on the big screen. Unfortunately, the movie was absolutely awful and failed to capture any of the magic that made the book so beloved. The Dark Tower stars Idris Elba as a gunslinger dedicated to protecting the titular tower and defending 11-year-old Jake from the Man in Black. Dark Tower should have been a slam dunk, but instead of being as original and exhilarating as the books, the movie was derided as generic action fare, which is everything King's version was not. Flatliners. When the original Flatliners hit theaters in 1990, it made a pretty penny at the box office, but still failed to impress many critics. Compared to this year's pseudo-sequel though, the original feels like an absolute masterpiece of horror. The film follows a group of med students experimenting with life after life. Their tests involve taking some heavy-duty drugs, stopping their hearts for a minute or two, and checking out the other side before being resuscitated. Naturally, messing around with the afterlife has serious consequences, but when our heroes start experiencing some spooky visions, the film devolves into Jump Scare the Movie. Critics called out the film's lack of suspense, foolish characters, and lacking visuals, leading many to wish the property would have just stayed dead. Geostorm. When the trailer for Geostorm first hit, everybody knew we were in for something brainless, but audiences had their fingers crossed for some campy fun. Unfortunately, the film had almost no redeeming qualities and got laughed out of the theaters. The film followed a man trying to save a series of satellites that protect the world from apocalyptic weather events after somebody sabotages the system. With catastrophes breaking out across the globe, there's a lot of visual flair in play, but those action scenes are few and far between, interrupted by long segments of boring, flat characters staring at a bunch of screens. The Snowman. On paper, The Snowman should have been awesome. It stars several formidable thespians and was directed by Thomas Alfredson, director of Let the Right One In and Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. But despite all that talent, the film is a bloody mess. Based on the novel by Joe Nesbo, The Snowman follows an alcoholic detective who chases a psycho with a thing for building snowmen. Unfortunately, the thrills are undone by a slew of messy subplots, over-the-top music, subpar performances, and a bunch of supposedly freaky frosties that really aren't that frightening. It also didn't help that The Snowman had one of the worst and most meme-worthy marketing campaigns in recent history.
No?
Gave you all the clues.
Instead of being scary, the movie ended up arriving as one of the year's most unintentionally funny movies, but only after being plowed by critics. Get it? Jeez, that's as bad as the movie. Thanks for watching. Click the link for the rest of 2017's worst movies, and check out all this other stuff we know you'll love too.